And the rest of, chapters 24, 25, read through them again, have a good look at it. Is Jesus telling us that not that the everyday events of life give us a clue. In fact, he distinctly denies that, except that he says Satan pulls off all these tricks and so forth and so on as time goes on to try and deceive the very elect. Let's just divert. Jesus, we'll get back to our actual scripture here. In chapter 25, as they're looking from the front, from the mountain, down there below, watching the city, evening is coming on. They've asked about the temple. Now they're watching there, that beautiful golden dome sitting there on the mount. It's all in its beauty. It wasn't the one that Solomon built, but it was another that had been built since. And the Romans certainly gave a lot of gold. Every year they gave big golden offerings to the church to keep it going. I think the Romans had been the bad guys, but for Judaism at the time of Jesus, the Romans were their saviors virtually. The amount of money they shipped across to keep the church and the temple beautiful was staggering. And so Jesus is looking down with his disciples, and he sees below him the city, the lights coming on, the little candles, people moving backwards and forth. And while it is called a parable, there is no proof that that is really a parable. It is a story, I believe, Jesus is watching unfolding down below him, and he's relating it to this question about when will you come and how will we know that it is you? And so there is a wedding underway. In those days, weddings were a little bit different than today. They weren't held in the church. They're not held in the temple, but they were between the groom's home and the bride's home. To start with, certainly the bride got ready and her bridesmaids helped her. And then as the process went on, everything moved back to the groom's home. And the bridesmaids went down there. The bride stayed home, right? And they had all this festivity and talks, and I imagine there'd be the dancing and whatever else they had. And then at a given time, the bridegroom, the male, would say, "Okay, folks, it's time to go down now, and we will have the weddings part of this of the service down there where my wife to be is." And so everybody would then move down the street. There would be singing and dancing, and there'd be lights shining, and they would finally arrive and go inside the house or in the yards area around the house if there were more than just could get inside the house. In verse 4 and 5 of chapter 25, we are told that the bridegroom was delayed. All of them became drowsy and slept. But at midnight there was a shout, "Look, here is the bridegroom, come out to meet him." Then all those bridesmaids got up and trimmed their lamps, and the foolish says to the wise, "Give us the oil." Okay, you know the story. At midnight, when all had gone to sleep, gone to bed, or sat down in some little corner and curled up, the city was silent. When all had given up hope that there was actually going to be a wedding in the foreseeable future. I imagine the bride was beside herself with disappointment. And those of you who've been brides would possibly think the same if the groomsman or the groom wasn't there waiting for you. Okay? Maybe the town's gossip service was waiting for the break of day to announce a scandal of a jilted bride. And then there was that startling cry or call, "Come out, here comes the bridegroom, come out and meet him." People would have got out of bed if they lived nearby. They would have got dressed, they lit their lamps, and they lined the street for the procession. And it tells us here that there was 5 of the 10 bridesmaids who suddenly found that they were not ready. It was their moment of glory, their moment of privilege, of honor. They had been chosen representatives of the bride, and normally their names would be forever linked to that couple and maybe the wedding of the year. For those of you who have been bridesmaids, you know what that's like. You remember who you were bridesmaid for. No, my wife remembers that. She tells me, oh, I was the bridesmaid for so-and-so and so-and-so every now and again when we either meet or talk about these things. Yeah, it's what happens. So this is everyday life going forward. But Jesus takes it and makes a very important point. First of all, panic seizes 5 of those who had been chosen because they realized that they don't have enough oil to sustain their lamps. It may not have been a long journey, but that's what happened. There was no sharing of oil because being ready was an individual prior matter of preparation. It was too late to get ready. They had to be ready for the bridegroom when he chose to come. And that delay section there is put in there, the story, because it possibly happened, but it also reinforces the point that Jesus was making. They could not get ready when the bridegroom came. They had to have been ready. That's the point that Jesus is making. Remember, Jesus looking down in time. How long, we don't know. And even he himself said, I don't know. My Father knows, but I don't know. The angels of heaven don't know. I can't tell you. Because you see, waiting for the bridegroom to come is what we do every day. At that point, there was no waiting. The bridegroom had come. They were the invited guests. The procession was underway. And the guests go in and the door is closed. At this point, Jesus is answering the many questions that were in the disciples' minds. When will these things be, and what will be the sign of your coming? And I've pointed out that that's a singular word. And most of us read as if it's plural, but it's not. The Greek word there for sign signifies an event that is awe-inspiring. It is beyond human description. It's like John in Revelation, you know. I couldn't find words to describe. It is overwhelming. A sign. The disciples are asking Jesus to describe his second coming. And in 24:27, Jesus actually answers their question. He tells them what the sign is going to be like. 24:27, I'll find it in a moment. Yes, here it is. And this is the second time when that word is used. This is in verse 30. Then the sign of the Son of Man will appear in heaven, and all the tribes of the earth will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory, and he will send out his angels with a loud trumpet call, and they will gather his elect from the four winds of heaven, from one end of heaven to the other. That's our scripture reading. And so here we have that very special word, not to a succession of events, but for a description of the event, the second coming of Jesus. And then I do want to read that one there in verse 24, where Jesus is warning about signs, which I think we often get hung up on. In 24, at verse 24, chapter 24, verse 24, for false messiahs and false prophets will appear and produce great signs, plural again, and omens, and lead astray, if possible, even the elect. Take note, I have told you beforehand. So if anyone says he's here or there or whatever, don't believe it. So Jesus uses that word in that one verse twice, isn't it? All right? The great signs. Did I see it twice? It's only once. Okay. Yeah, the sauce, the plural. So what's Jesus talking about? He is outlining that whatever he has already described will be an ongoing phenomena until such time as he himself breaks into world history and establishes his kingdom with his people. There would be a world of immorality, of choice, of deliberate evil as a way of life. And there was going to be a loss of sensitivity. The love of many shall wax cold. There was going to be religious miracles in verse 24. There was going to be date setting, verses 36 and 42. And through all this, there would be those who keep their faith alive in God, though their numbers would be few.